Tomb Raider King opens inside a dark and freezing tomb, filled with the smell of death. Blood spreads across the stone floor. The bodies of 3 men lie motionless, and the main character, Goriki Ryuga, appears in a ruined state, gasping for breath, still gripping a sword stained with blood. His eyes no longer look like the eyes of someone completing a mission. They look like the eyes of a man who has been pushed to the very edge of rage and despair. Standing before Ryuga is a gigantic monster shaped like a snake or a dragon. Its whole body is dark purple and black. Its presence is so vicious that it feels like death itself has crawled out of an ancient grave. Even though he is the only one left, Ryuga still tries to fight back, but he cannot escape the monster's devastating strike. He is smashed into the stone wall, coughing blood, his body nearly pushed past its limit. Even so, the main character still refuses to fall. He gathers the last of his strength, lets a faint blue aura surround his body, then concentrates energy into his sword. In that life or death moment, Ryuga charges forward and slashes directly into the monster's left eye, making blood burst out violently. It is a fiery counterattack in a situation where survival already seems impossible. But unfortunately, this opponent is not the kind of enemy that goes down after one clean hit. The monster immediately counterattacks, bites Ryuga badly, and sends him falling into the center of the tomb. Blood keeps flowing. His body is so torn apart that just looking at him is enough to know the ending has almost been decided. In that moment, the strongest thing burning inside him is no longer the will to live, but hatred. Ryuga grits his teeth and screams the name Ugawara Taisei, the man who pushed him and his teammates into this deadly mission. It turns out this was not just a failed tomb raid, but a betrayal prepared from the beginning. He thought he had accepted a job, only to receive a death sentence underground. Just as death seems ready to swallow everything, the monster suddenly stops, and a mysterious voice rings out from a relic shaped like a demon statue holding fire in its mouth. It sounds surprised that Ryuga can hear it. While Ryuga answers that he has always been able to hear the voices of relics, even while dying, he still tries to order it to destroy the serpent and save him. But the relic only mocks him coldly, because with his current body, Ryuga has no chance of surviving anymore. His body has already been split in two inside a pool of blood. The relic's mysterious voice continues echoing with cruel amusement. It asks if he is in pain, as if seeing a man lose the lower half of his body is not brutal enough. But instead of begging or falling into despair, Ryuga only burns with even greater fury. Inside his mind, there is only one name left, Ugawara Taisei, the man who forced him into this death trap. Ryuga swears that as long as he has even one chance, he will take revenge on Taisei no matter what it costs, even if he has to use the cruelest methods possible. That hatred and stubborn will to live finally catch the relic's interest. It decides that letting Ryuga die here would be a waste of talent. And right after that, the image of a giant glowing crow appears. The relic chooses to give him one chance to see whether Ryuga has what it takes to sit on the true throne. In the next moment, Ryuga suddenly wakes up inside a police station. There is no tomb, no blood, and no gigantic monster in front of him. He looks down at his body in shock and realizes that his arms and legs are still intact. Everything happens so suddenly that Ryuga wonders whether what he just experienced was only a dream or a hallucination. But the noisy scene in front of him quickly pulls him back to reality. A woman is yelling loudly, and beside her is a young man who has just caused trouble with him. Ryuga gradually remembers this situation. This is an event from 15 years ago, back when he was weak and had no money. At that time, he had been forced to kneel and beg just to reduce the absurd settlement payment the other side demanded. It was the kind of miserable past where poverty and bullying arrived together. But the current Ryuga is no longer the man who had to bow his head back then. He realizes that he has returned to the past, and this time, he chooses a completely different reaction. Facing the aggressive mother and son, Ryuga no longer holds back and loudly pushes back against them. When the young man charges in to hit him, Ryuga immediately restrains him and throws him down with ease. That exact moment makes him realize something important. Even though his body has returned to the past, his combat skills and survival experience are still intact. In other words, Ryuga has not only been revived, he has also brought the memories of an experienced tomb raider back to the starting line. After the fight, Ryuga is locked inside a holding cell. Outside, the woman keeps screaming, threatening that she will not settle and will call someone she knows to handle the situation. But Ryuga no longer cares very much. He sits silently in the cell and begins thinking about the future that only he knows. Once the relics appear, the world will quickly fall into chaos. The current law will soon lose much of its meaning, because true power will belong to those who control the strength of the tombs. From here, the story explains the origin of that chaos. Massive earthquakes once occurred all over the world, leading to the appearance of countless ancient tombs. Inside them were relics connected to mythology and legends. Anyone who excavated a relic would gain a special ability, causing all of humanity to plunge into a frantic treasure hunt. Ryuga himself once found the archaeologist's relic, a glowing blue cube that granted him the ability to understand knowledge about tombs and relics. He once thought his life had finally turned a new page, but the moment that opportunity opened, the TKBM group appeared, claiming exclusive excavation rights barricades over the tombs and using force to drive him away, even threatening to shoot him if he refused to leave the area. From that point on, Ryuga understood clearly that in the world to come, relics would not only represent power, they would also bring money, corporations, guns, and dirty conspiracies, but this time, he has future memories and survival experience, so the game will definitely not play out the same way again. Inside the holding cell, Ryuga begins remembering all the humiliation he once suffered under Ugawara Taisei after the TKBM group monopolized the right to excavate relics. People like Ryuga had almost no way to survive if they wanted to enter the tomb raiding world on their own. In the end, he had to do every dirty job for Ugawara, from smuggling, theft, spying, to breaking into forbidden tombs to steal relics. Through those jobs, Ugawara gained more and more power, while Ryuga turned himself into a loyal dog, enduring humiliation and orders, simply because he believed he could at least earn money and survive in that chaotic world. But the final result was bitter. The people he served never saw him as a comrade. They only saw him as a tool to be used and discarded, and they even pushed him into a deadly trap inside the tomb. Back in the present, Ryuga understands that if he wants to change the future, the first thing he needs is money, a large amount of money, so he can prepare for excavation and move ahead of every other faction. At that exact moment, floating words suddenly appear in front of his eyes. Ryuga immediately recognizes this as the status window, something that only appears to those who possess a relic. The system informs him that he has activated his first basic skill, F-rank psychometry, which allows him to search the area within a radius of 1 meter. This skill reminds Ryuga of the archaeologist's relic, the blue cube that once gave him the ability to understand knowledge about tombs and relics. That also means the abilities connected to relics can still be activated in this timeline, but the more he thinks about it, the more cautious he becomes toward the crow relic. The thing that sent him back to the past, it definitely did not save him out of kindness. There must be another purpose behind it. And Ryuga understands that he has been given a chance, but he may also have been pulled into a much larger game. Not long afterward, Uncle Ken, a police officer who knows him, bails Ryuga out. The moment he steps out of the holding cell, Ryuga immediately asks Ken about strange cases, such as monsters or people with supernatural powers. But Ken denies everything. That answer helps Ryuga confirm his guess. The tombs may have already begun to appear, but nobody has truly obtained and used relics openly yet. In other words, this is the earliest stage, the golden moment for him to act before the whole world switches into a race for power. The next thing Ryuga needs to do is earn enough money to fly to Europe or America, the places where many important relics are concentrated, and conveniently, his walking ATM appears right in front of the police station. Araike and his gang of thugs. Ryuga remembers that back in high school, because he needed money, he used to work part-time for this group. He was paid almost nothing and was often used as a punching bag. But the current Ryuga is no longer the powerless kid from the past. He calmly announces that he is quitting, then demands that they pay every bit of salary they still owe him. Araike obviously refuses to accept being talked back to by someone he once looked down on. He orders his men to attack Ryuga, but the thugs quickly realize that they have picked a fight with the wrong version of the main character. This Ryuga has already received 15 years of experience. With only a few moves, he easily defeats all of them, forcing Araike into a corner. In panic, Arai pulls out a sword, but what shocks Ryuga is that the blade suddenly bursts into flames. This is not an ordinary weapon, it is a relic, and that detail immediately shatters Ryuga's original assumption. Because someone has obtained a relic earlier than he expected, the episode ends as Araike charges straight toward Ryuga with the burning sword. And for Ryuga, this may be less of a crisis and more like a relic delivering itself right to his doorstep. Ryuga presses the blade right up against his opponent's throat and calmly declares that the item now belongs to him. And as for the sword, it's meant to be used in a completely different way. Turns out this weapon can see straight through a person's skeletal structure, exposing every weak point like a glowing map. The two underlings panic the moment they see their boss disarmed and charge in together. But in Ryuga's eyes, their movements are so predictable it almost feels like slow motion. He slips right through their formation, cutting cleanly into critical points one after another. By the time they realize what happened, it's already too late. They're bleeding out before they can even figure out where the attacks came from. Ryuga casually turns back and asks if anyone else wants to try, but one look at their terrified faces is enough to tell him no one's volunteering for round 2. Not long after, Arai calls the boss to report what happened. She can't believe someone like Ryuga, who used to be nothing special, just wiped out an entire group. Arai tries to explain that his speed, his eyes, even the way he fights has completely changed, but the director only truly loses her composure when she hears that Ryuga took a Buddha statue. Her blood pressure instantly skyrockets as she orders her men to retrieve it at all costs. That overreaction says everything. The real value is never on the outside. The next morning, Ryuga goes around trying to sell the statue at antique shops, but every single place turns him away. Some even tell him to throw it out, saying it's not worth 5,000 yen. To anyone else, it's just a useless chunk of junk. But Ryuga remembers the panic in Arai's group, so he activates his low-rank detection skill, and the system immediately flags something suspicious hidden inside. Without hesitation, he uses the sword to break open the base. A small container drops out. Turns out the gallery has been smuggling illegal goods by hiding them inside art pieces. On the outside, it looks peaceful and sacred. On the inside, it's enough to send an entire organization straight to prison. Ryuga immediately calls Uncle Ken. From just that one piece of evidence, the police quickly trace it back to the gallery and its warehouse. The director still tries to act innocent, demanding proof and confidently claiming the police could never unlock the storage rooms because each one uses a different code. But that confidence shatters the moment the radio reports that hundreds of artworks have already been uncovered. Every hidden item is now laid out in front of the police. And the one who cracked the entire system was Ryuga. He even calls her just to casually remind her that if you're doing something illegal, at least change your passwords once in a while. After wishing her a nice time in prison, Ryuga receives a 10 million yen reward from Uncle Ken. And just like that, his biggest problem is solved. Because if he wants to hunt tombs and compete for relics, he can't walk in empty-handed. He plans to head home, get some rest, and start fresh the next day. But right at that moment, a massive structure suddenly erupts from the ground right in his neighborhood. Before he even has to go looking for a tomb, the tomb comes straight to him. The area is quickly sealed off, but the Japanese authorities clearly have no idea what they're dealing with. Meanwhile, two foreign forces have already arrived. Linda Walker from the US, someone Ryuga instantly recognizes as CIA, and Louis Kenshi from the Pento Republic excavation team. They stand in front of the tomb, neither willing to cooperate. Watching from the outside, Ryuga quickly realizes they may have fast intel, but they're not true tomb hunters. Right then, glowing red letters begin to appear around his feet. Ancient tomb script, the language of relics, and the system that records everything about the tomb itself. The text reveals the entrance, the layout, even the traps inside. At the same time, his linguistic skill activates. One of the core abilities of a tomb hunter is now unlocked. He follows the markings to what looks like a solid wall, places his hand in the right spot, then cuts across it. Light spreads instantly, and a massive pillar of fire erupts into the sky. Layers of glowing red symbols spiral outward. While Linda and Louis are still stunned by the dramatic entrance, Ryuga has already stepped inside. They rush in after him. Inside, it's pitch black. Ryuga lights a small flame and reads the ancient text along the walls. It leads him into a massive cavern with a waterfall and a crystal clear lake. The place looks almost peaceful, like a hidden paradise. But someone who's died in a tomb before knows better. The calmer it looks, the more dangerous it is. Without hesitation, he pulls out the sword and throws it straight into the lake. The water instantly erupts. A massive serpent rises from below, its body stretching across nearly the entire lake. And the first thing it says is, "Who dropped something here?" After a brief exchange, the serpent presents two weapons, one gold, one silver, and asks which one belongs to him. Ryuga instantly recognizes the setup, the classic woodcutter and water god relic. A story so common you could guess the answer with your eyes closed. Play honest, get rewarded. Show greed, get punished. When asked, Ryuga calmly says, neither belongs to him. The serpent is pleased and returns his original weapon. According to the story, this is where he would receive all the rewards, but Ryuga doesn't take them. Instead, he asks to inspect his original sword first. The serpent agrees, completely unaware of what's coming next. The moment Ryuga gets his weapon back, he flips instantly and attacks. The serpent is caught completely off guard, furious at the betrayal, but Ryuga couldn't care less. There's no such thing as a free reward. And this kind of test has fooled plenty of people before. In the previous timeline, the owner of this relic was manipulated and turned into a mass murderer. So Ryuga was never here to earn rewards. He came to take the relic itself. He drives the blade into the serpent's head, releasing a surge of power as the creature thrashes violently, trying to shake him off with its massive body and the force of the water. But Ryuga clings on and declares he will force it into submission. The serpent mocks him, saying someone who just returned to the past can't possibly dominate it. But Ryuga doesn't need raw strength. He understands the system. There are three key factors when dealing with relics: harmony, building trust until the relic willingly cooperates; domination, forcing it to obey through sheer will and pressure; and compatibility, how well your nature aligns with the relic. A musician fits a musical relic, and someone like Ryuga, who negotiates with his fists, is perfectly suited for domination. The serpent tries to overwhelm him mentally, but 15 years of experience makes Ryuga completely immune. No matter how hard it thrashes, no matter how many times it throws him off, he keeps coming back, climbing right back onto its head again and again. He declares that in this life, he will never rely on harmony. He has no interest in befriending something that could turn its owner into a killer, so he gives it a choice: submit or be destroyed. For the first time, the serpent panics. Its massive body begins to break apart into light until it completely disappears, leaving behind two axes, one gold, one silver. The system immediately confirms the tomb has been conquered. Excavation skill unlocked. 3 out of 4 core abilities are now active, and on top of that, he earns a title: Relic Intimidator, boosting domination power at the cost of harmony. Ryuga instantly realizes this is the system mocking him. But before he can think further, he senses Linda and Louis approaching. He quickly hides near the lake and watches. Louis throws an item into the water, trying to summon the relic, but nothing happens. They arrive too late. The owner is already gone. Frustration builds as the tomb begins to collapse, forcing them to retreat empty-handed. Meanwhile, back outside, the gallery organization is completely wiped out. The director arrested, their entire operation dismantled. Kureha talks big about revenge, only to instantly switch tones the moment Ryuga calls him, from boss to obedient subordinate in seconds. Ryuga doesn't even bother arguing. He just gives them their next mission, a secret auction in Las Vegas, one of the biggest hubs for rare artifacts in the world. Their target is a man named J.K., also known as Ugawara Taisei, the one who betrayed Ryuga in the previous timeline. He's not just hunting relics anymore, he's hunting his enemies. When they ask about funding, Ryuga promises to cover everything. Refuse, and they can go meet Iron Man in heaven. Somewhere else, Louis reports his failure, only to learn that a Japanese man already cleared the tomb before him, and now he's being warned to watch out for that person. For the first time, Ryuga is no longer a nobody, he's now a target. After stocking up on supplies, Ryuga prepares for his next hunt. A news broadcast nearby reports a series of bizarre murders where victims act like they were controlled before dying. Ryuga immediately recognizes the pattern. Another tomb is about to appear. Right then, he runs into Louis and notices a small pink relic on him, carelessly exposed. Louis gets annoyed and starts a confrontation. But Ryuga has no intention of fighting in public, so he plays it smart. He shakes a soda can right next to him, sprays it all over Louis' expensive suit, then acts overly apologetic, pretending to help clean it while casually stealing the relic and even picking up Louis' ID to return it like a kind stranger. Louis, worried about his identity, doesn't even check. And just like that, Ryuga walks away with another relic. Moments later, the ground begins to shake, cars crash, and people panic as a new tomb has appeared. Louis receives confirmation and is told the one who stole the relic is nearby. He suddenly remembers the soda incident, turns around, but it's already too late. Ryuga is gone, and this time, he's not just ahead, he's already taken the prize, setting the stage for an even more dangerous battle in the next tomb. An entire city block collapses into an enormous pit with countless blades embedded across the ground and stone walls. Many civilians are dragged down with the ruins and fall among the wreckage. Ryuga manages to keep his balance, immediately sensing the malicious energy spreading throughout the space. He quickly recognizes the location as Muramasa's tomb, a dungeon connected to the legendary Japanese sword and its blood-soaked curse. Muramasa was originally the name of a famous swordsmith, but blades bearing his name were rumored to have killed several members of the same ruling family. As a result, this tomb is especially hostile toward humans. The longer the victims remain trapped inside, the more likely they are to become prey to the curse. The interior is far larger than Ryuga expected. He summons the golden axe to search the area, but even the relic's light cannot reveal Muramasa's location. Knowing that Louis is being guided by the Book of Prophecy, Ryuga assumes his rival will reach the destination first and decides to follow his trail. However, the screams of nearby civilians pull his attention toward a schoolgirl surrounded by a red aura. Her eyes have turned completely white, and she is swinging a sword while chasing everyone around her. Ryuga immediately determines that a relic has taken control of her body. Even worse, anyone cut by the blade may become its next host, meaning the situation will spiral out of control as more people are infected. Nearby, a deep lake separates the two sides of the tomb. A bridge of light appears only after someone is thrown into the water as a sacrifice. This proves that the civilians did not fall here by accident. Someone deliberately used their lives to open a path deeper into the dungeon. One witness identifies the person responsible as an agent from the Pento Republic. The man sang a strange song in the Pento language, causing rain to fall before exploiting the tomb's mechanics and throwing the civilians into the pit. He then crossed the bridge and continued forward. Ryuga realizes that Louis cannot be far ahead. He takes out the pink relic stolen from him, an object connected to the story of a rope descending from the heavens to save two brothers from a tiger, and activates its power. The moment the rope appears, the system announces that Ryuga has unlocked the F-rank dexterity skill. Together with psychometry, linguistics, and tomb excavation, he has now acquired the 4 basic abilities required of a tomb raider. The mission is officially completed, and the reward will be granted once he escapes. Before he can celebrate, the possessed schoolgirl attacks. Countless swords buried around the area also rise and fly toward him. Ryuga avoids her uncontrolled slashes, weaves through the incoming blades, and closes the distance. Rather than killing her, he extends the rope and wraps it around her arms, torso, and legs. The red aura quickly disappears, and the cursed markings around her eyes begin fading. She collapses but remains alive, meaning the possession has at least been suppressed. Unfortunately, the rope appears to possess a mind of its own, and repeatedly demands to keep playing with her. Ryuga has to drag it away before it finally obeys. His newest relic is apparently powerful, cheerful, and completely incapable of reading the situation. The civilians confirm that Louis crossed the bridge and entered the cave on the opposite side, proving that he is following the correct path toward Muramasa. Ryuga promises to help everyone escape, but in return they must testify against the man who used them as sacrifices. Meanwhile, Louis continues alone through an area filled with swords, confident that every witness has been left behind. Once he obtains Muramasa, his mission will be complete. After that, he plans to return and kill Ryuga as revenge for being tricked out of his relic. When Ryuga and the civilians reach the central chamber, they find hundreds of swords embedded across the stone floor. Real and false blades are mixed together so perfectly that they cannot be distinguished by sight. Ryuga calls upon the golden axe. Blue energy sweeps across the chamber and eliminates every decoy, leaving only a single Japanese sword glowing with purple light at the center. This is the real Muramasa. The moment Ryuga pulls it free, the blade begins speaking. To claim its power, the wielder must feed it the blood of 10 living people. Once enough blood is consumed, Muramasa will restore its true form. Refusing the trial will cause everyone inside the tomb to remain trapped forever. The challenge is designed to force the excavator to commit murder. Muramasa repeatedly urges Ryuga to cut down one of the civilians standing nearby, but he only tightens his grip and coldly refuses. Ryuga has no intention of following the relic's rules. Instead of sacrificing innocent people, he uses domination and directly forces Muramasa to submit. The sword immediately resists. Its purple aura transforms into streams of red energy that coil around Ryuga's arm and body. The entire field of swords begins shaking, and countless copies turn toward the civilians. Muramasa screams in fury that a mere human dares to control it. Ryuga continues gripping the sword even as the cursed energy begins damaging his arm. Muramasa wants to absorb living blood, so he turns that ability against it and orders the blade to reclaim every one of its own duplicates. Streams of light are pulled back toward the sword, while the surrounding copies gradually lose their power. Muramasa struggles desperately, but Ryuga's will continues overpowering it. Eventually, the purple glow disappears. The blade turns blue and becomes silent in the hands of its new master. Ryuga did not complete the trial or persuade Muramasa to cooperate. He simply forced a cursed relic to bow before him. After subduing the sword, he allows the civilians to climb out of the tomb using the rope. One injured man remaining below promises to introduce Ryuga to the powerful organization supporting him, offering a large salary, complete assistance, and access to the Book of Prophecy. The moment he mentions TKBM, Ryuga's expression changes. That is the organization that once turned him into a disposable tool and sent him to his death. Ryuga waits until every civilian has escaped, then suddenly kicks the man back down. He calmly tells him to call TKBM if he wants to be rescued, then climbs out alone. The tomb begins collapsing as rocks fall through the pit. The man's fate remains unknown, although his chances of escaping are rapidly disappearing. The incident quickly becomes international news. Television reports describe a massive earthquake in Kawasaki, where an unidentified structure emerged beneath the city. More than 50 people were trapped inside an area filled with sharp objects covering the walls and ground. Witnesses directly accuse agents from the Pento Republic of causing the disaster. The Japanese government immediately demands an explanation, while South Korea and Russia begin criticizing both Pento and its American allies. The existence of tombs and relics, once concealed from the public, has now been dragged into the open. Inside a Pento government meeting room, officials are furious that one failed mission has developed into a diplomatic crisis. The officer responsible for the excavation is questioned after confidently claiming he could eliminate the Japanese target mentioned in the prophecy. He apologizes and explains that the Book of Prophecy can still trace Ryuga. Normally, the marking ability requires the book's owner to make direct contact with the target. However, someone previously marked by the book has now come into contact with Ryuga. That indirect connection allows Pento to create an incomplete trace and continue searching for him. In his hotel bathroom, Ryuga examines an arm almost entirely covered in dark bruises. This is the backlash caused by using domination to force Muramasa into submission instead of completing its trial. The stronger the relic, the more violently it resists. If he continues using the ability this way, his body will eventually be unable to endure the damage. At that moment, the system confirms that he has escaped the tomb, completed the mission, and earned the right to select one of two development paths: domination or harmony. Harmony encourages relics to cooperate willingly, while domination uses strength and willpower to force obedience. Despite the serious injury covering his arm, Ryuga does not hesitate. He returned to the past for revenge, not to become friends with supernatural objects. Clenching his aching fist, he officially chooses the path of domination. From now on, every relic he targets will receive only two options: submit or be destroyed. A short while later, Ryuga examines the cursed energy still clinging to his arm when a small white pill appears in his palm. The object provides no instructions, but he assumes it is meant to be swallowed. Even knowing it could kill him, Ryuga immediately throws it into his mouth. A man who already died once inside a tomb is not particularly frightened by a mysterious reward with no user manual. The pill is bitter enough to twist his face, but the black-purple damage across his arm quickly fades. Every injury caused by the cursed energy is completely healed. The system announces that Ryuga has successfully resisted a relic's influence and acquired the resistance ability. Poison gas and similar effects will now have far more difficulty bringing him down. It is an extremely valuable skill, but it also makes him more suspicious of the Crow relic, the entity that returned him to the past and keeps providing exactly the advantage he needs at exactly the right moment. Such a convenient resurrection must serve another purpose. Immediately afterward, the system warns that an S-rank relic has marked him and is remotely reading his future. Ryuga identifies it as Zhuge Liang's Book of Prophecy, supposedly left behind by the legendary ancient strategist. Unlike relics that create tombs, the book personally selects its owner. Its current chosen wielder is the schoolgirl Sasaki Yuka. In the original timeline, the Pento government discovered Sasaki at a very young age. It placed her under protection and invested enormous resources into using her prophetic ability for its excavation teams. However, Sasaki struggled to understand the ancient symbols appearing inside the book, leaving most of its contents beyond her ability to interpret. Later, another person emerged who could use a prophetic relic far more effectively. Sasaki's story eventually ended with her body lying motionless in a pool of blood. That memory proves Pento's protection was never necessarily intended to keep her safe. She may have been nothing more than a tool waiting to be replaced once her value declined. In the present, Sasaki still lives under Pento's surveillance. While she watches television, a bespectacled supervisor reminds her that it is time to read the Book of Prophecy. The glowing characters inside immediately make her dizzy. Her handler orders her to copy every symbol exactly, even if she cannot understand it. As Sasaki follows the instruction, her face turns pale. The book is repeating the same message again and again. Sasaki Yuka will die. While Pento enters a state of emergency, Ryuga has already flown to Hakata and is calmly eating sushi inside a rented room. A notebook in front of him is filled with the sentence, "Sasaki Yuka will die." This is not a natural prophecy. It is bait deliberately created by Ryuga. He knows the Book of Prophecy cannot ignore a direct threat against its chosen owner. By continuously producing a clear intention to kill Sasaki, he forces the book to mark him. Pento's forces will then lead themselves directly to the place where he is waiting. The plan works quickly. Armed agents surround the room, while Sasaki is disguised as a waitress and instructed to carry a tray of sushi to the man the book claims will kill her. Pento tells her that she only needs to look directly into Ryuga's eyes and leave. Eye contact will complete the mark. They also assure her that Ryuga does not know her appearance and that an entire team is waiting outside. Such promises sound comforting to the people safely watching through monitors. Sasaki is still the one who must enter the room alone. The moment the girl appears, Ryuga senses that the owner of the Book of Prophecy is standing before him. His hand instinctively moves toward his sword. The surveillance team immediately assumes Sasaki is about to be attacked and prepares to storm the room. Instead, she unexpectedly asks whether she can become one of Ryuga's fans. Wanting to communicate without allowing the people outside to hear, Sasaki takes out her phone and types a message filled with slang, heart symbols, compliments about his appearance, an invitation to drink bubble tea, and questions about whether he likes anyone. Even Ryuga, armed with 15 years of future experience, freezes before the language of a modern schoolgirl. He understands tombs, curses, and ancient artifacts, but has no idea whether she is genuinely flirting or attempting to communicate something important. Nevertheless, he quickly recognizes the opportunity to speak beyond Pento's surveillance. Ryuga types a reply and hands the phone back. The message remains hidden from the audience, but Sasaki blushes and smiles after reading it. The agents outside still have no idea what agreement the two have just made. The surveillance cameras suddenly lose their signal. By the time Pento's forces enter the room, every agent who attempted to block the escape has already been neutralized and is lying unconscious. No deaths are confirmed, but none of them can continue the pursuit. Ryuga places his backpack over one shoulder, rests a hand on Sasaki's shoulder, and leads her away. He continues their performance by suggesting they move somewhere more romantic for the rest of their date. Behind them, the remaining agents immediately draw their weapons and begin chasing. Ryuga has temporarily removed the owner of the Book of Prophecy from Pento's direct control, but the relic still does not belong to him. The agreement between him and Sasaki remains secret, and the real pursuit has only just begun. After escorting Sasaki Yuka out of the room filled with Pento agents, Ryuga places an arm around her shoulders and walks down the street as though the two of them are genuinely on a date. A vehicle continues following them from a distance. What irritates him most is that the military is willing to send a high school girl carrying the prophecy book directly toward a dangerous target. Sasaki is surprised that he already knows she is constantly being watched, but Ryuga says the surveillance was painfully obvious. He pats her head and promises that together, they will make the people controlling her regret their decisions. His confidence helps Sasaki relax. She begins to wonder whether the man beside her is truly as frightening as everyone warned, and whether the prophecy claiming he would kill her may have been wrong. The moment they enter an empty alley near a restaurant, Ryuga's behavior changes completely. He draws Muramasa and places the blade directly in Sasaki's path, freezing her in place and instantly destroying the charming image he created moments earlier. He tells her to remain silent, takes her pink phone, and throws it onto the ground. One step crushes the device Pento was using to communicate with and track her. Only after ensuring that no one can listen does Ryuga reveal that he knows she is the owner of the prophecy book. Sasaki realizes that the supposed date was merely a way to escape direct surveillance. His real objective is the book that has already recorded his future. Inside the cafe, Ryuga places a blank notebook on the table and orders Sasaki to summon the prophecy book and copy everything she sees. She immediately claims that she left the book at home. Ryuga does not argue. He points toward the mark on her arm and instructs her to touch it while calling the relic's name. Golden light surrounds her body, and the book appears immediately. Ryuga calmly continues eating, while forcing Sasaki to copy every character without omitting a single prophecy. After being made to write for what feels like an eternity, Sasaki's hand hurts so badly that she can barely hold the pen. She asks whether surrendering the prophecy book itself would convince him to release her. Ryuga immediately refuses. He may take dangerous risks, but he is not stupid. If stealing the book were easy, he would never have needed her to copy its contents. The prophecy book is an S-rank legendary hero relic, far more powerful than Muramasa. Forcing control over one cursed sword already allowed demonic energy to consume part of his arm. Attempting to seize ownership of the book could cost him his entire body. Instead, he lets its legitimate owner summon it and transfers the information into an ordinary notebook. When Ryuga senses the Pento soldiers approaching, he orders Sasaki to stop writing. She panics when he raises Muramasa, but he quickly tells her not to misunderstand. The blade is not aimed at her. Ryuga swings directly at the open prophecy book on the table. The relic immediately resists. Blue electricity erupts, its pages flip violently, and an enraged voice demands to know how he dares attack it. Ryuga refuses to release the sword and forces Muramasa deeper into the center of the book until its energy begins to collapse. The blue light finally explodes, leaving the prophecy book completely burned. Sasaki falls against the chair from exhaustion, but Ryuga never attacks her. He explains that destroying the book also benefits her. As long as the prophetic relic exists, Pento will continue treating Sasaki like a forecasting tool and sending her into dangerous situations. This was not an impulsive decision. Ryuga already collected the information he needed, avoided the danger of forcibly claiming an S-rank relic, and destroyed the object, allowing the organization to exploit her. The system immediately grants him a title associated with destroying relics through force. His dominance increases, his harmony falls again, his ability to sense relics improves, and psychometry rises from F rank to E rank. The cafe door is kicked open as 3 armed Pento soldiers rush inside. The moment their commander sees the burned prophecy book, he panics and declares that Ryuga will be executed on the spot. Instead of drawing his sword, Ryuga offers him a pink C-rank pastry. This is no ordinary snack. It has been enhanced by the system to directly stimulate the brain. Its aroma seems to possess physical weight, overwhelming the senses of all 3 soldiers. The commander takes the pastry with trembling hands, not because he is frightened, but because an uncontrollable hunger is swallowing his ability to think. He forgets the weapon in his hand, his mission, and nearly everything else. Only the pastry remains important. When the other 2 see their superior eating it, they immediately attack him for a share. Their guns fall across the floor as the supposed professionals begin wrestling like lifelong allies who have suddenly forgotten every concept of loyalty. Ryuga calmly leaves the area without having to fight any of them. Not long afterward, Ryuga boards a flight to Las Vegas alone. In front of him is the notebook containing the prophecies Sasaki copied. One passage mentions the Great Tombification, the future disaster in which enormous tombs consume the world and release countless relics. Another prophecy states that an opportunity will appear in January inside the underground Garden of Desire, where a great calamity begins and a god who understands human desires will emerge. Using his memories from 15 years in the future, Ryuga identifies the location as the underground Midas auction in Las Vegas. Ugawara Taisei will almost certainly be among its participants. Immediately after arriving in the city, Ryuga meets Kuroha's group and receives a list of invited guests. 3 participants are using names with the initials JK, but one profile immediately stands out, a large Japanese man in his 50s, whose true identity has been deliberately concealed. Ryuga identifies Jack Kamen as an alias belonging to Ugawara Taisei. The man who once used him as a disposable tool and sent his entire team into a deadly tomb has finally appeared. The problem is that the public Midas catalog contains no divine class relic matching the prophecy. Meanwhile, every noteworthy item has an opening price of roughly 1 billion, and Ryuga does not yet possess enough money to enter the competition. Surrounded by the brightly illuminated casinos of Las Vegas, Ryuga chooses the fastest possible method of earning money. He carries the golden axe into a slot machine hall and secretly uses its ability to detect and attract treasure. The axe repeatedly identifies machines that are about to release their rewards. One jackpot appears after another. The crowd around him grows larger with every victory, while Kureha's group watches from behind in disbelief. The impossible winning streak soon attracts casino security, who arrive and demand an inspection. Ryuga calmly agrees. The relic's ability does not alter the machines, meaning the casino cannot discover any evidence of cheating. At the same time, news that the prophecy book has been destroyed reaches an unknown figure elsewhere. A subordinate recommends eliminating the culprit, but the person standing in the shadows would rather recruit someone capable of destroying an S-rank relic. As Ryuga leaves the slot machine area, a bespectacled man orders everyone to clear the way for an important guest. Ryuga immediately recognizes Ito Takuya. Ito turns and respectfully addresses the older man behind him as chairman, causing Ryuga's eyes to lock onto Ugawara Taisei. Memories of the blood-covered tomb and the final betrayal return at once. Even so, Ryuga does not draw his sword. Ugawara has not yet met him in this timeline and has no idea who he is. Ryuga silently promises that every valuable relic in the auction will be taken directly in front of the man who once betrayed him. Ryuga checks the two relics inside his bag. The golden axe specializes in locating treasure, while the silver axe detects people or dangers threatening the owner's property. The silver axe suddenly begins glowing and points toward the main hall. At the same moment, financial disasters erupt throughout the casino. Players accuse one another of cheating, money disappears from accounts, machines suddenly malfunction, and arguments spread with no obvious cause. Through the chaos walks a calm blonde woman. Ryuga immediately recognizes Irene Holton, the youngest daughter of the powerful Holton Financial Group. In the previous timeline, the owners of divine-class relics received titles such as the King of Fate, the King of Conquest, and the King of Prosperity. Irene became the woman feared by countless organizations under the name King of Bankruptcy. Simply remaining near her could cause people to lose their property and become ill, while entire corporations could collapse. Recognizing the danger, Ryuga immediately orders Kureha's group to take the luggage and run as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, Irene has already noticed him. She calls out and quickly approaches, leaving Ryuga wondering whether his finances will survive the encounter. Irene stops Ryuga and apologizes for approaching so excitedly. She confirms that he was the person who repeatedly won jackpots and desperately asks for his secret. Ryuga immediately denies knowing anything, but Irene continues waiting for an answer. Kureha and the two others are annoyed that a beautiful woman is holding his hand while he continues acting distant. However, the moment they are moved elsewhere, all three experience separate waves of misfortune and collapse onto the floor. Irene can only bow and apologize. She does not deliberately attack anyone. Disasters simply appear around her without warning. Once the two are alone, Irene admits that she is essentially a walking embodiment of bad luck. Anyone who remains near her eventually suffers misfortune. For that reason, she wants to improve her luck and someday become someone capable of bringing happiness to others. The confession is completely different from the cold and terrifying King of Bankruptcy Ryuga remembers. Irene offers to pay any price if he can help her. At that moment, the system reports that Ryuga's resistance has activated automatically against the relic following her, reducing its power by half. This is the ability he acquired after enduring Muramasa's demonic energy. Ryuga originally intends to remain as far away from Irene as possible. However, once he realizes that resistance can grow while exposed to the relic's effects, his calculations immediately change. Staying near her will help his body adapt to another dangerous relic while causing misfortune for his rivals inside the auction. Ryuga agrees to help, although he explains that he still has important business to complete. He then personally invites Irene to enter the Midas auction hall with him. The 74th secret Midas auction officially begins, but nearly 2/3 of the guests are forced to leave the hall to deal with sudden disasters. One receives news of an earthquake, another hears that a fire has broken out, while businesses and personal assets fail one after another as though bad luck is moving through the rows and checking names from a list. Even a factory belonging to Ogawara's company in the Pento Republic catches fire. His group still refuses to leave. That proves Ogawara is targeting something more valuable than the damage occurring outside and will remain until it appears. Irene becomes excited over a bottle of Russian imperial wine aged for 100 years, while Ryuga concentrates only on the items appearing in the second half of the auction. Watching her genuine fascination with ordinary antiques convinces him that Irene currently knows almost nothing about relics. A relic carrying misfortune may have attached itself to her without permission, continuously destroying her life until she eventually became the King of Bankruptcy. Irene thanks Ryuga for listening. Simply having someone with whom she can share the troubles she has carried for so long makes her feel lighter and happier. The moment Irene smiles, a system window warns that the relic's aura is increasing dramatically in response to its owner's emotions. Severe misfortune spreads across a wide area, placing the relics carried by everyone nearby at risk of critical damage. Even Ryuga's equipment begins reacting violently. He finally understands that Irene's power grows stronger the happier she becomes. Her kindness is genuine, but that only makes the disaster surrounding her more difficult to control. Irene anxiously asks whether her emotions are causing trouble again. As guilt lowers her mood, the system immediately reports that the relic's destructive power has returned to its original level. Ryuga now understands the rule controlling the effect. Instead of merely enduring it, he begins using it deliberately. When Irene becomes depressed because she believes she brings only unhappiness, Ryuga assures her that she is fully capable of making people happy. She only needs to follow his instructions and everything will be resolved. Irene immediately brightens, causing the aura of misfortune to rise again. The remaining guests gradually lose their composure. They become obsessed with the auction items, bid without restraint, or suffer sudden disasters forcing them to leave. The already empty rows grow even more deserted. Ryuga realizes that Irene can remove most of his competition, but Ugawara continues sitting calmly. One of his attendants believes the chairman's dominance is high enough to resist the effects of the king of bankruptcy. Whenever Ugawara's faction shows interest in an item, Ryuga immediately raises his hand and joins the bidding. This forces his enemy to spend more money while allowing Ryuga to study which object they truly want. The Code of Hammurabi, Shakespeare's pen, and Marie Antoinette's necklace appear one after another, but none possesses the divine class aura mentioned in the prophecy. The catalog is nearly exhausted, yet the object Ryuga needs has still not appeared. He remembers an item once reported in the news but never included in the public Midas list. At that moment, the auctioneer announces one final special product. The curtain opens to reveal a small sapling with only a few green leaves. The auction house describes it as a mysterious almond tree, and it resembles an ordinary plant someone might forget beside a window. However, both Ryuga and Ugawara's faction immediately change their expressions. The item before them is the Herb of Immortality, the secret treasure that brought everyone to the Garden of Desire. The true battle between Ryuga and the man who once betrayed him is finally about to begin. The worst memories from the previous timeline immediately return. Back then, Ryuga's body was being severely consumed by relics, with his life weakening more each day. The only thing keeping him alive was the fruit of the immortality herb, but the medicine belonged to Ugawara. To receive even a few pieces, Ryuga had to complete every dirty assignment given to him, from infiltrating tombs and stealing relics to missions that could easily have killed him. By controlling the medicine, Ugawara turned him into a dog, chained by his own survival. In the present, the immortality herb represents the years when Ryuga had no control over his life. Allowing Ugawara to obtain it could cause the same future to repeat, and Ryuga did not return 15 years into the past merely to bow his head again. The auction host has no idea what the plant truly is, and introduces it as a rare almond variety believed to improve vitality. The opening bid of $200,000 quickly rises into the millions. Ryuga places a bid, Ugawara's faction raises it, and the price jumps from $10 million to $40 million and then $100 million. Ryuga knows that his personal fortune cannot compete indefinitely against a massive corporation, so when the bidding reaches $100 million, he asks Irene to take over. The blonde heiress calmly raises the offer to $150 million. Ugawara counters with $160 million, and Irene simply raises two fingers to bid $200 million. Edo Takuya recognizes her as the youngest daughter of the Holton family. Ugawara still wants to raise the price to $300 million, but his subordinates restrain him. Continuing the contest could transform a dispute over one item into a conflict with an entire financial empire. The hammer falls at $200 million, awarding the immortality herb to Irene. Ryuga watches Ugawara struggle against his own men and casually advises him to remain calm. Other people win auctions with their own money. Ryuga wins by borrowing the fortune of a billionaire heiress. Their first direct contest ends in an unmistakable defeat for Ugawara. After leaving the hall, Ryuga admits that his plan would have been extremely difficult without Irene's assistance. In exchange, he promises to resolve the chain of misfortune surrounding her. Irene still believes that she merely lacks good luck and asks whether he can share some of his fortune with her. Ryuga explains that a relic attached to her body is continuously releasing disasters. If he can remove the bankruptcy relic, the misfortune should end. He privately calculates that separating it from Irene would allow him to save her while also acquiring an incredibly dangerous power. That plan collapses the moment Irene shows him the black markings on her body. Ryuga initially suspects a bonding-type relic similar to the mark Sasaki Yuka carried after obtaining the Book of Prophecy. Irene's mark, however, consists of branching black lines resembling tree roots. They spread across her waist and back and appear deeply embedded in her body. One glance is enough for Ryuga to identify it as an extremely rare parasitic-type relic. It has not simply formed a contract with Irene, but has merged directly with its host. Their connection is too deep for Ryuga to seize it through domination alone. Forced to abandon the idea of immediately stealing its power, he admits that he needs more time to find a solution. He assures Irene that he will not disappear after accepting her help. Relieved, she thanks him, while Ryuga decides to keep her nearby so he can continue observing the relic and make use of her field of misfortune whenever necessary. At the collection counter, the employees bring out the immortality herb and all the other items the pair purchased. The amount is so large that Midas offers assistance with transportation, but Ryuga refuses and calls Kureha's group instead. The phone continues ringing without an answer, and his expression immediately changes because those men are carrying his money and property. In a nearby alley, Kureha and his two companions are clutching several bags of cash and celebrating what they believe is a successful escape. Ryuga suddenly appears behind them and asks who gave them permission to run away with his possessions. Kureha cannot understand how he found them so quickly. Ryuga calmly produces the silver axe. The relic can detect people and dangers targeting its owner's property. Attempting to escape while carrying his money was effectively the same as running away with a tracking device still active. Ryuga then takes out a dark stone tablet. Kureha mistakes it for some kind of foot-scrubbing stone until blue energy erupts and an enormous monument appears behind them. It is the Code of Hammurabi, a relic connected to the ancient king of Babylon and the famous principle of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Hammurabi's ability does more than return whatever harm an enemy causes its owner. Because it represents a legal code, it can also establish rules that monitor future behavior. Ryuga activates the relic on all three men. Rings of blue light wrap around their bodies, and the system confirms that the targets have been placed under observation. Ryuga explains that nothing will happen as long as they remain loyal. However, if they betray their new master, the code will punish them. All three immediately swear obedience now that their employment contract has been engraved directly into their bodies. Back at their accommodations, Ryuga assigns the three men to care for the immortality herb. The plant lies uprooted on a large sheet and continues complaining, but it quickly calms when they touch its trunk, branches, and roots. Ryuga previously attempted to force it into a contract through domination, only for the relic to resist violently. Kureha's group is accepted after only a few gentle touches. Ryuga realizes that all three possess unusually high harmony. His own path relies on forcing relics into submission, while the immortality herb prefers people capable of building friendly relationships with them. The three men who recently attempted to steal his money are therefore reassigned as caretakers for a divine plant. At that moment, an unfamiliar number calls. The man on the other end introduces himself as Ugawara Taisei of TKBM and immediately asks about the plant Irene won at the auction. Ugawara already knows Goriki Ryuga's identity and that the immortality herb is currently under his control, proving that TKBM has begun investigating him. Ryuga coldly states that the two of them have nothing to discuss. His attitude enrages Ugawara. Ito, who is standing nearby, immediately volunteers to retrieve the immortality herb personally. He believes that Ryuga is merely an ordinary civilian and that one company relic will be enough to deal with him quietly while earning recognition from the chairman. Ugawara approves the request, unaware that the subordinate he has just dispatched is about to deliver another relic directly into his enemy's hands. Several days later, Ryuga waits inside a bar for the threat detected by the silver axe. Ito arrives and demands the return of the immortality herb. Ryuga continues drinking calmly. Only when Ito begins shouting does he knock him down and apologize, claiming that the sudden noise startled him. Ito reminds Ryuga that they met at Midas. Ryuga pretends to remember and identifies him as the man who constantly follows the chairman around. The remark strikes directly at Ito's deepest insecurity. He is obsessed with gaining Ugawara's recognition, and merely mentioning it is enough to destroy his composure. A status window immediately reports that Ito's domination is weakening. Domination does not depend only on magical energy. It is also directly influenced by the user's mental state. Someone unable to control his own emotions cannot force a high-ranking relic to obey. Ryuga continues by boasting that Ugawara personally called him, then asks how desperately Ito needs the chairman's approval. Ito completely loses control and produces a spherical container filled with powder. He attempts to activate it, but the relic refuses to respond because his domination has fallen too far. Even the company's own weapon has rejected him. Ryuga closes the distance, knocks Ito down, and takes the container. Only then does Ito understand that his opponent knows far more about relics than expected, and deliberately provoked him from the beginning. Ryuga uses domination to force the item to accept a new owner, then pours the golden powder directly over the man who brought it. The substance is Voodoo Priest's zombie powder, an A-rank relic that temporarily destroys the reason of anyone who touches or inhales it, causing them to behave like the undead. Ito begins convulsing, his eyes turn red, and his mind falls into chaos. The man who arrived to steal a divine plant ends up experiencing his own weapon firsthand. Ryuga does not kill him. He allows the temporary effect to continue and leaves, knowing that an assistant running through the streets in an uncontrollable state will keep Ugawara occupied while his group transports the loot out of Las Vegas. At TKBM headquarters, Ito is confined inside a private room. His body is covered in injuries, and he screams that he can see ghosts. Ugawara cares only about the relics Ito carried. When a subordinate reports that none remain in his possession, Ugawara immediately orders them to abandon the useless man and summons the company lawyer, Nogami Masako. Their attempt to seize the plant through force has failed, so TKBM changes its strategy. At the airport, Kureha and his two companions struggle beneath the weight of numerous suitcases while Ryuga orders them not to leave anything behind. The luggage contains the foundation of his growing organization: the Golden Axe, Silver Axe, Rescue Rope, Muramesa, the Code of Hammurabi, Shakespeare's pen, Marie Antoinette's necklace, the immortality herb, zombie powder, the mummification knife, the treasure jar, and Homer's mirror. To Ryuga, these relics are not merely trophies. They are capital, weapons, and the foundation of the power he will need to confront TKBM. As soon as the inventory is complete, a black-haired woman approaches and introduces herself as Nogami Masako, TKBM's lawyer. She explains that Ugawara highly values Ryuga's abilities and wants him to join the company's excavation team. The offer initially sounds extraordinary: $100 million upon signing, a monthly salary, and permission to continue operating his private team without interference. The essential condition, however, is that Ryuga must become TKBM's subordinate. He asks directly whether she is offering him a slave contract. Nogami immediately abandons negotiation and begins threatening him. She warns that Ugawara may retaliate for the loss of Ito's relics. Ryuga's subordinates could suddenly die from mysterious illnesses, and he would not be exempt. The message is clear: accept the money and submit, or his entire group will disappear without leaving evidence. Unfortunately, Nogami has chosen the wrong person to intimidate. Ryuga places the zombie powder on the table and announces that the person about to vanish without a trace will be her. Nogami assumes he would never dare activate a relic in a crowded airport cafe. Ryuga opens the container. Forced into an unfavorable position, Nogami attacks first and fires a water cannon directly at him. Ryuga immediately activates the code of Hammurabi. The principle of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is enforced. Because Nogami uses water cannon, the code returns an identical water cannon against her. The two streams collide violently before Ryuga forces the entire attack back toward its caster. Nogami is thrown across the cafe, completely soaked, and collapses onto the floor. Travelers immediately gather and begin recording the incident with their phones. The silent elimination TKBM wanted has become a public confrontation witnessed by dozens of people. Nogami survives, but she has lost control of the situation and cannot continue as though nothing happened. Airport security rushes toward the explosion. Using the confusion, Ryuga returns to Kureha's group with another stolen relic: the ink of the painter of Montmartre Hill, a consumable B-rank item with 50 uses remaining. Before Ryuga can enjoy his latest acquisition, a mysterious voice suddenly speaks inside his mind and orders him to follow its directions because danger is approaching. He immediately recognizes the voice of the crow relic, the object that returned him to the past without ever explaining its true purpose. Ryuga asks whether Kureha can hear a crow speaking, but the entire group stares at him as though he is arguing with empty air. He becomes furious, complaining that the crow sent him back 15 years and appears only to issue commands without explanation. While he is still shouting at it, a middle-aged man in a suit enters the cafe with the calm expression of someone completely unaffected by every failure that came before him. He looks at Ryuga and remarks that the young man appears to be enjoying his journey. The moment Ryuga turns around, his expression becomes cold. The man standing before him is Ugawara Taisei, the person who once controlled the medicine keeping him alive, forced him to perform dirty work, and ultimately sent his entire team into a deadly tomb before abandoning them. To the present Ugawara, Guriki Ryuga is merely a stranger he has recently encountered. He calmly introduces himself as the chairman of TKBM. To Ryuga, however, this meeting has been 15 years in the making. Every memory of betrayal, humiliation, and death returns at once. The difference is that this time, he is no longer a dog chained by the immortality herb. The target of his revenge, previously existing only inside his memories, has finally become a man standing directly before him. Ryuga does not immediately draw a weapon. He understands that Ugawara is far more dangerous than every subordinate he has defeated. A single careless move could cause his group to lose every advantage it has gained. Kureha knows nothing about the hatred between the two men and hurriedly bows to greet Ugawara. Before he can finish speaking, the chairman coldly orders him to be silent. Ugawara's eyes immediately turn red, and a purple aura wraps around Kureha's body. He grabs his head and collapses in agony. His two companions rush forward in panic but cannot understand what happened. One short command was enough to remove Kureha's ability to resist. The power resembles domination, although its true mechanism remains unknown. Ryuga stands still and observes, finally recognizing the vast difference between Ugawara and the subordinates he recently defeated. Ito possessed only one A-rank relic. Nogami relied on threats and water cannon. Ugawara has barely entered the room, yet his presence alone is already suffocating everyone inside it. The crow's warning was clearly justified. The confrontation Ryuga has awaited for 15 years has finally begun, but at its opening moment, Ugawara is the one holding the advantage. The moment Ugawara uses his power to force Kureha to her knees, Ryuga slips behind him and presses Muramasa against his neck. He even calmly asks whether using domination on another human is not going a little too far. Ugawara does not panic. Instead, he praises Ryuga for being more capable than expected. But while he is still acting confident, the power he was using suddenly disappears. Only then does Ryuga raise several black tickets he has just stolen directly from Ugawara. They are the invitation of the solitary god, a consumable god-grade relic. Only now does Ugawara realize that Ryuga managed to steal a relic right from under his nose. Unfortunately, Ryuga's current domination is still not powerful enough to force a god-grade relic into submission. Losing one item does not leave Ugawara helpless either. Ryuga realizes that he is activating a conquest relic capable of manipulating the mind and forcing others into obedience. Worse, it is a parasitic-type relic just like the one attached to Irene, meaning it has merged deeply into Ugawara's body and is almost impossible to locate and steal. On top of that, he possesses an armor relic protecting his entire body, practically turning him into a walking fortress. Ryuga asks whether Ugawara really intends to use relics openly in the middle of an airport. Ugawara replies that cleaning up afterward may be troublesome, but allowing Ryuga's group to remain alive would be even more troublesome. He decides to eliminate everyone on the spot. The moment he orders them to submit, purple pressure crashes down on Kureha and her two companions, forcing them to the floor. Even Ryuga is bent beneath the force. At that exact moment, the crow relic speaks and orders Ugawara to withdraw his power immediately. This place is the resting ground of the hound and the jackal. If he continues using his relic, whatever is sleeping here will awaken. Ugawara not only refuses to stop, but becomes interested when the crow reveals itself. He declares that after dealing with Ryuga's group, he will take care of the crow as well. The crow can only respond by calling him a complete idiot. Immediately afterward, the entire airport begins shaking violently. Cracks tear across the ground as a red barrier covers the surrounding space. Beyond the windows, the city and sky transform into an apocalyptic landscape. Stone statues, pyramids, and ancient structures begin appearing in the middle of the modern world, while the system warns that an Egyptian pathogen is attempting to invade their bodies. Ryuga immediately remembers the prophecy Sasaki once recorded. In January, an opportunity would appear within the underground Garden of Desire, and from there, a massive disaster capable of plunging the entire world into chaos would begin. What he is witnessing now is great tombification. Kureha barely understands what is happening before Ryuga confirms that their entire group has been trapped inside a newly formed space. The immediate trigger was Ugawara ignoring the crow's warning and awakening something that should never have been disturbed. Even Ugawara admits that he has never encountered a phenomenon like this before. Looking outside, Ryuga realizes that the airport is far from the only place affected. Countless tombs are appearing simultaneously across the world. Enormous ancient structures rise between modern buildings, the sky turns red, and barriers swallow entire regions. Before anyone can search for an escape route, a piercing sound forces them to cover their ears. A massive white beast emerges from the darkness, radiating overwhelming pressure. Ryuga recognizes it as a relic of the god Set, one of the major Egyptian deities associated with the desert, darkness, destruction, and chaos. And apparently, the god-grade relics have decided not to wake up one at a time. A black beast resembling a Doberman emerges immediately afterward. This is Anubis, the god who governs the dead and their souls. Even more absurdly, the talking collar around its neck is Osiris himself, the god associated with fertility and ruler of the underworld. 3 god-grade relics have awakened in the same area. With that kind of lineup, it suddenly becomes much easier to understand how great tombification can spread across the world so quickly. After catching the scent of humans, the white entity immediately becomes irritated. Being forced to share the same space with them is apparently offensive enough that Set wants to erase everyone on sight. Ryuga does not retreat. Instead, he summons the Code of Hammurabi, raising an enormous stone monument directly in front of the god and openly provoking it. Set already considers the relic before him far beneath its own rank, making the insult of a mere human daring to challenge a god even more infuriating. Set gathers golden energy and fires directly at Ryuga. The Code of Hammurabi immediately enforces its principle. Whatever harm one inflicts must be repaid in equal measure. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. The golden blast rushing toward Ryuga is immediately answered by an equivalent counterattack erupting directly back at its source. The reflected attack hits Set hard enough to nearly reduce the imposing divine beast to something far less dignified. One of the Egyptian relics suddenly notices that Ryuga carries the scent of the black crow and claims that the trace became especially obvious during the attack. Anubis is immediately shocked. The black crow is the traitor who once sided with humanity and should have been sealed away long ago. Before the Egyptian relics can even agree on whose sense of smell is wrong, they start arguing with each other. Eventually, Anubis loses patience and decides to punish Ryuga through its own trial. Ryuga is abruptly pulled into another space. Before him appears a gigantic judgment hall containing a golden scale, with a feather resting on one side while Ryuga himself occupies the other. The judge presiding over the trial is none other than Anubis. Ryuga remembers hearing about this mechanism from someone who once possessed the Anubis relic. The accused must answer 42 questions before the judges. Answer every question correctly, and the trial is cleared. There is only one dangerous condition. Lying carries an extremely severe penalty. The very first question is whether Ryuga has never stolen anything in his life. His smile immediately freezes. Tomb raiding and stealing relics used to be his profession. Seeing his silence, Anubis moves to the next question. He has never lied before, correct? Then comes another. He has never struck another person, correct? None of the questions are complicated. They just happen to be almost perfectly designed to destroy Ryuga. The more questions he hears, the more Ryuga begins sweating. He finally understands why the person who once told him about this trial had cleared it so easily as a child. They simply had not lived long enough to accumulate many serious mistakes. Ryuga, meanwhile, has somehow walked directly into the worst possible questionnaire for his lifestyle. Anubis does not even need all 42 questions. After only a few rounds, it concludes that the human before it is thoroughly sinful. Before Ryuga can protest, he is grabbed and thrown straight through a dark gate. Anubis cheerfully invites him to enjoy a tour of hell, although this particular vacation does not appear to include a return ticket. Ryuga lands inside a scorching cavern filled with flowing lava and scattered bones. Black humanoid creatures with glowing red eyes quickly crawl from the darkness. He grabs a random bone and uses it as a weapon, but every enemy he defeats is immediately replaced by another. Ryuga is forced backward again and again. One creature even bites down on the bone right in front of his face, yet he continues resisting, absolutely refusing to become dinner in the underworld. Just as the encirclement is about to close completely, golden light suddenly pours down. The Black Crow appears once again within the radiance and immediately mocks Ryuga for looking so miserable. It says that it has been a very long time since it personally lent its power to another person, so Ryuga had better be grateful. Energy floods the cavern, blasting away the creatures surrounding him. Outside, Kureha's group and Ugawara are still watching the spatial sphere suspended in the room. Set begins losing patience because the judgment is taking unusually long. Then it notices a crack forming across the surface of the sphere, something even the god-grade relic has apparently never witnessed before. Purple lines of light rapidly spread across the entire structure before it shatters apart. Ryuga walks out almost completely unharmed, his body still wrapped in violet energy. Set cannot understand how a human managed to break out of Anubis's judgment space. The answer appears directly behind him. The Black Crow is flying beside Ryuga. Set immediately realizes that the supposed traitor really did interfere, while Anubis returns completely exhausted, clearly having just suffered a painful defeat at the Crow's hands. The Egyptian relics become even angrier when they remember that the Black Crow should have been sealed away. Set also points out that the Crow willingly chose humanity's side. Their anger therefore shifts directly toward Ryuga and everyone around him. Set declares that it will bury them all alive. Enormous mummies with glowing red eyes begin rising from the ground and surrounding Ryuga. Yet he remains completely calm, to the point that even the Black Crow looks over and asks why this human is not frightened. Standing within the territory controlled by the Egyptian relics, Ryuga draws his sword and says that this is actually perfect. In here, he can finally use as much power as he wants. The red-eyed mummies charge. Ryuga cuts them down one after another, evading their attacks and immediately countering, but their numbers never decrease. Every mummy that falls is replaced by several more rushing in behind it. The Egyptian entities even take mummy forms themselves and mock him, explaining that the undead army is endless. At this rate, swinging his sword until his arms give out will only make him an unpaid employee of the graveyard. Ryuga quickly realizes that destroying the endless bodies is pointless. He needs to locate the true relic. He sheaths Muramasa and instead draws the Egyptian mummification knife. The moment the relic appears, it becomes excited, as though it has finally returned home. Ryuga asks whether, as another Egyptian-type relic, it can sense anything unusual. The knife enthusiastically reports that its power is increasing and that Anubis is extremely close. Ryuga immediately asks it to identify the location. With that, one man and one knife charge directly into the sea of mummies. Other tomb raiders need maps. Ryuga has apparently decided to use ancestral GPS. Wherever the golden blade passes, the undead formation is torn apart. The Egyptian relics begin noticing something strange. They mention the Black Crow's ability to devour other relics and suspect that the supposedly sealed creature may truly have returned. Before they can discuss it further, Ryuga reaches the location indicated by the mummification knife. The hidden relic panics, unable to understand how it was discovered. Ryuga does not bother explaining and simply slashes straight into the point his knife identified, throwing the entire mummy army into chaos. One of the entities cries out Osiris's name in alarm. Ryuga keeps the mummification knife pointed toward them and demands that the previous judgment be invalidated. He wants a complete retrial. Anubis warns that even if Ryuga receives another opportunity, he still has no chance of clearing the trial. Ryuga merely smiles and declares that this time, he is absolutely certain he will pass. The surrounding space transforms once again into the Golden Judgment Hall. Anubis and the scales appear before him, and the ritual again requires him to answer 42 questions. At this point, it is beginning to feel less like divine judgment and more like the world's most hostile morality exam. Anubis barely has time to begin acting like a proper judge before Ryuga grabs it by the neck. He declares that from now on, every question will be worded according to his instructions. Get even one wrong, and Anubis is going straight into the cooking pot. Naturally, the first topic is theft, which is something of a sensitive subject for a professional tomb raider. Anubis tries to ask the question according to the original rules, so Ryuga simply pretends he cannot hear properly. When the frustrated judge bluntly asks whether he has ever stolen anything, Ryuga kicks it over and demands more respectful language. The God of Judgment has unfortunately encountered a man whose willingness to cause trouble considerably exceeds his respect for divine procedure. Sweating under the pressure, Anubis finally changes the wording. "You have committed acts of theft before, correct?" Ryuga calmly answers yes. The statement is completely truthful. Only the rules of the examination have now been twisted almost beyond recognition. Anubis is preparing to move on to the second question, when it finally snaps and asks whether Ryuga seriously intends to do this for all 41 remaining questions. Ryuga responds with the confident smile of a professional who has already found the loophole. Anubis immediately understands that this is going to be a very long shift. Then the judgment space begins collapsing. The sphere of energy surrounding Ryuga disappears. Even Ugawara, watching from outside, cannot hide his shock. The system confirms that Ryuga has successfully subdued an Egyptian god-grade relic. His resistance skill rises to C rank thanks to Anubis, and numerous additional notifications fill his vision. Apparently, the entire ordeal has rewarded him with a substantial amount of progress. Ryuga stares at the flood of notifications and immediately suspects that the damn crow is deliberately making fun of him. Some of the titles sound less like achievements and more like professional certificates issued on the spot. After witnessing everything, Ugawara changes his attitude. He apologizes for his earlier disrespect and admits that he seriously underestimated Ryuga's ability. Then he offers cooperation. Ugawara says the world is about to change completely, and someone with Ryuga's talent clearly possesses extraordinary potential. If Ryuga agrees to work for him, TKBM will provide all the resources and support he needs. On paper, it sounds like the perfect recruitment package. Money, power, resources, and a powerful organization backing him. The only detail missing from the sales pitch is the part where that same company once treated its employees like disposable tools and sent them into deadly tombs. To Ugawara, this is merely an attempt to recruit an exceptional talent. To Ryuga, however, the man extending his hand is the same person who once turned him into a tool and sent his entire team into a mission from which they were never supposed to return. Ryuga therefore gives no verbal answer. His eyes turn cold. Muramasa leaves its sheath in one impossibly fast motion, and the blade flashes across Ugawara's neck before anyone can react. Kuraha and the two others beside her can only stare in stunned silence. Ryuga says nothing. He simply stands there looking at the enemy he has carried in his memory for 15 years.